In the last few minutes, US President Donald Trump has announced sweeping tariffs on goods imported into the United States from all countries, including the UK. British-made products will face tariffs of 10% from this Saturday. 10% is the baseline tariff applying to all countries in the world. There will, though, be higher, more punitive tariffs on about 60 other countries, which Mr. Trump sees as the worst offenders when it comes to trade imbalances with the United States. For example, 34% tariffs on goods from China. Well, the president also confirmed a 25% tariff on foreign-made cars effective from midnight US time. He said that together, all these tariffs will raise hundreds of billions of dollars a year for the United States, making, in his words, America wealthy again. Well, the president has been speaking in the Rose Garden of the White House on what he's billed as America's Liberation Day, though for many around the world there are now fears of a global trade war, economic slowdown and recession. Well, tonight we'll have analysis and reaction from around the UK and across the world throughout the programme. We'll be hearing from our economics editor, Faisal Islam, and also from our political editor, Chris Mason, on how the UK government will react to these 10% tariffs on British goods. But first, let's go to Sarah Smith at the White House. And Sarah, Donald Trump saying this is one of the most important days in US history.
Yes, he says that economic moves like this haven't been done since the Second World War, and that he is declaring economic independence for the United States. So as you said, there will be tariffs ranging from 10% all the way up to 50% being charged on different countries to export their goods into the United States. And Donald Trump explained that he has set these tariffs depending on how other countries treat US exports. Have a listen to what he had to say.
In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal, that means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple, can't get any simpler than that.
Now, by reciprocal, we should explain what that means, because it's not just a direct tariff for tariff. What's happened is that the White House have calculated all the different ways in which they see trade barriers. So that could be straight tariffs. It could be other non-tariff barriers, like, for instance, technical restrictions, maybe a ban on imports of something like genetically modified corn or hormone-injected beef, that sort of thing. If you need a license to import goods from America, that also counts. They talk about currency manipulation and even the theft of intellectual property. So there are lots and lots of ways in which they have come up with some kind of sum that they say represents the totality of the tariffs that American goods are faced when they are being exported into China or Cambodia or the EU or the UK, for instance. They've come up with a number which, for instance, in Cambodia's case is 97% is what they say the tariff on American goods going there is. So they're halving that and charging 49%. With the EU, they say that they had added up all of the different restrictions they see between trade between the US and the EU. They brought that to 39%, and that's why there's a 20% tariff going on. But other countries that don't fall under this heading, a blanket 10% tariff is being put on all other goods, and that's where the UK falls.
OK, Sarah, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. So as we've been hearing, the UK is facing 10% tariffs on the goods it exports to the US. Well, earlier today, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves indicated the UK government will not rush to retaliate against new American tariffs. And in the Commons, the Prime Minister said Britain will take a calm, pragmatic approach and continue talks with the US about a wider trade deal. Let's get the latest from our political editor, Chris Mason. Chris, what do you think the British government's going to do about this?
Well, it was an extraordinary spectacle, wasn't it, Ben? There you had the president brandishing that rectangular tariff piece of cardboard in front of the world's press and cameras, as if offering the odds at a horse race. And the striking thing is that people in government here were absorbing that live on the television, just as people were around the world. There is a sombre tone from people I speak to in government here tonight, because their view is that any tariff is something they would rather not have. But they are relieved that the 10% tariff is at the lower end of expectations, both in terms of international comparison and, crucially, compared with how high they feared it might be. And actually, in just the last 30 seconds or so, we have had a statement from the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. It runs to several paragraphs. I'll bring you the thrust of it. It is the first time I'm seeing it as I read it to you. He says that we'll always act in the best interests of UK businesses and consumers. He points out that in the last few weeks there has been negotiations ongoing about a limited trade deal between the US and the UK, with the hope that that might bring these tariffs down or indeed eradicate them. He says we have a range of tools at our disposal. We will not hesitate to act. We will continue to engage with UK businesses, including on their assessment of the impact of further steps. Nobody wants a trade war, he says. Our intention remains to secure a deal, but nothing is off the table. The government will do everything necessary to defend the UK national interest. So they're attempting to maintain, Ben, a sober and, as they would see it, a proportionate response to what we're seeing from Washington, and a desire to keep negotiating this hoped-for trade deal, but holding on to the potential to ratchet things up were that to prove necessary.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed. And we can also talk to our economics editor, Faisal Islam, who's with me in the studio. Faisal, these tariffs are clearly going to have a huge impact on the British economy, also the global economy. What's your assessment of where we are tonight?
When you step back, I think you have to give the context to this, which this is an extraordinary move, actually. Even if we may have expected larger numbers in some regards, hundreds of billions of dollars per year is what they say it should raise. 6 trillion over a decade was the figure that Donald Trump used. They confirmed the 25% car tariffs coming into force tonight, no exclusions for the UK. And at base, although we heard a lot about reciprocal tariffs, so, you know, tit-for-tat, quid pro quo, based on what is done to America right now, at base, there's a 10% universal tariff for everybody. So it may be a relief that the UK is at that lower ebb, but that still means 6 billion on that. Maybe if you include the cars, 7 billion of extra costs. But the point of this, we hear, is to divert trade flows. I think we can see the document that was held up by President Trump there. And you see a whole sort of list. And in the blue there, you see what America thinks is being done to it. And it isn't just the tariff, as Sarah was saying. It's currency manipulation and other trade barriers. And President Trump says he's being kind by only sort of replying with half of that. But there are some huge numbers there, including some rather poor countries, some crisis countries like Myanmar and Laos and Bangladesh. They're on 37%, China on 34%. Well, that's huge. European Union on 20% when the UK is on 10%. Well, that's a net benefit, you might argue, for the UK, but also it could create some distortions to trade. The bottom line is this: the model of trade in the world will shift hugely. That is the point of this change, but it could cause, Taiwan, a key ally of the US, also tariffed hugely. So this could change the geography of economics for good, and it's designed to do so, and that will not be without some disruption.
OK, Faisal, thank you very much indeed. Faisal Islam, our economics editor.